Hey, this is Liz from People I Think Are Cool, a bi-weekly podcast where I interview my favorite creatives from across the globe. If you're looking for a dose of creative inspiration, then go to peopleithinkarecool.com or subscribe to People I Think Are Cool on iTunes and Stitcher.
You like film, from cult to classic, from blockbuster to B-movies. And there just isn't that one place with all the fan fervor and passion that's covering the kind of mad, diverse brilliance that you love.
Well, that's where you're wrong.
AfterMovieDiner.com is that fan-built movie nirvana just for you, featuring the sweet, sweet writings of the wife dork herself. AfterMovieDiner.com. Go there. Be the best you can be.
You are listening to the In the Mouth of Dorkness podcast, the official podcast of the Alamo Drafthouse, Winchester.
Welcome to another edition of the It Modcast podcast. Joining me is Brian Young, the Turtle Dork.
Yeah, hello everybody.
And also joining me is Lisa Gullickson, wife dork.
Hello.
And Brad Gullickson, mouth dork.
I'm of a mind to make some moogie.
And I'm your host, Darren Smith, the disco dork. One small thing, Murray. When you bring me out, can you introduce me as Joker? And welcome to another edition of the It Modcast podcast. This is our review cast for Joker.
Didn't know we were doing quotes.
It's okay.
You missed the quote window.
You missed the quote boat.
I'm so used to this part we're doing our fistful. Anyway.
Yeah, you blew it, Brian.
Peek behind the curtain.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. We are here to talk about Joker, a very controversial, is it safe to say controversial?
Yeah, I guess so.
It's interesting watching the controversial narrative as the movie has come out and people have actually seen the movie.
Yeah.
I feel like people went into this film with a lot of like preconceived notions, and I feel like they watched the film in the spirit of confirming their notions. And whenever anybody shares their opinions about this film with me, I'm like, I'm skeptical that you believe what you think you believe.
Well, Lisa, I do.
It's funny.
Brad does.
It's funny that you mentioned that because I actually went in taking into account the early criticisms that I had heard about the film as it being like extremely violent and really rough and dark. But to me, and I don't know what this says about me, but coming out of that film, I didn't view it as such. Is it like a happy sunshine movie with rainbows and unicorns? No. But John Wick 3 had way more callous murders taking place on screen.
Yeah.
To me, the criticism I'm talking about is that this will be a film that activates incels, and that it's a celebration of that kind of culture or ideal.
Yeah.
I don't think that that's the film's message.
No,
No,
I don't.
not
either.
at all.
I don't either.
Yeah, watching the film, I definitely don't get that from the movie.
Yeah.
I can understand why somebody would interpret it that.
I do too, but then that means that you have to ignore the end of the film, which we're going to spoil, by the way, guys.
Yes, spoilers, ladies and gentlemen, if you have not seen the film, if you are so inclined and if this is your bag or you find it interesting, please go check the film out and then come back and listen to the review because we're going to dive into spoilers and specifics. So without further ado, let's do what we usually do. We'll start with the good, then proceed to the bad and the ugly.
Before we do that,
Yes,
can we
yes.
actually talk briefly
Yep.
about, because we were talking about this off the air, what our different crowds were like coming out of this film.
Okay, Brian.
Oh yeah, I saw it Thursday night, and the crowd, as far as once the movie ended, like I said, it was just like a wolf, like a grimness. Like everybody was just like, all right, like that was very depressing. Let's go about the rest of our evening. And it was just that type of atmosphere, that type of feeling leaving the theater. There was a couple in my row that left the movie about midway through, regardless if they left because they were bored and know the type of film they were getting into, or if they were just disturbed by the material they saw. That I don't know, but I think it just speaks a lot, especially from the things I've been hearing about. There have been people walking out of the film, so I don't know. It's just I could definitely see that happening a lot, and it does have that sense or that air of despair to it, that it won't leave you, wanting to just immediately want to converse with your fellow filmmakers leaving the theater and ask, hey, what do you think? I mean, of course that will happen, but it just, I don't know, it just kind of leaves you with an icky type of feeling.
I think it should. I think it's supposed to.
Yeah, I do too, but that was just the atmosphere leaving the theater.
What about you, Wife Dork?
Brad and I saw this on Friday night at the AMC Tyson's Corner. And the crowd was laughing and cheering as if they were watching a comedy / MCU film.
Really?
They were way into it.
Bizarre. And there's the one moment where Joker has come, or I guess Arthur has come into his full Jokerness. And we see this shot in the trailer where he's dancing down the stairs as if he is Marilyn Monroe in, what's that movie where she dances and sings about diamonds?
Gentlemen prefer blondes? I don't know.
Yes. And that
it's
scene
his coming
is
out moment. It's his victory. Like his posture's changed. Like he is Joker. He is here to celebrate.
He's
his
ready
new
to
life.
present Joker to the world. He's going on Murray Franklin's show, and the audience is cheering, and I am weeping. It was so weird. How did it make you feel, Brad?
I mean, I definitely found it kind of odd, but also understandable for a Friday night Tyson's Corner crowd that came to go see the new Batman movie, the new comic book movie, and they were treating it under the context that they were watching a comic book movie. It didn't surprise me at all. It was definitely different than the audience that we saw it that Darren and I went and saw it on Tuesday night, which was an advanced screening, press screening situation. And that was maybe not as extreme as what Brian experienced, but it was a much quieter crowd. It was a crowd that was certainly affected by it and came out maybe with their head hanging down. Because, I mean, it is a depressing experience. It's a punishing experience of a movie.
But they didn't take it that way.
Yeah,
I don't think.
I guess to get a little ahead of the review, that moment when he does become full Joker, and you have that scene on the stairs, and you have that music playing.
Yeah, Gary Glitter.
Yeah, and it almost feels like this victory lap of a moment, and I found myself being kind of conflicted because for a moment,
You're supposed to, though.
I was thinking like, I was looking at it as like a comic book movie. I was like, oh man, he's become the Joker, but then I'm looking at it as the journey of this character. I'm like, no, this is not.
Well, what's
good.
the expectation of the story? Like when you buy tickets to go see a Joker movie, you're going to watch the creation of a supervillain, right? As we have experienced it. We all bring our own baggage of what the Joker should be. We all have our favorite Jokers, whether it's Jack Nicholson or Heath Ledger or Jared Leto for some reason, or Mark Hamill or Cesar Romero. Like we all have our favorite versions of these characters, and it's why we argue over and over and over and incessantly about them. My point of view, and we've talked about it when we talked about Dawn of Justice and Suicide Squad and Nolan's Batmans, is what I love about adaptations is the variety. All Batman are valid. All Joker are valid. I have versions of the characters that I prefer over others, but I find all the interpretations interesting. And I like that these characters allow for, different coats to be drawn on their frames. And that's what I find exciting about it. But like you go in to see the Joker movie on Friday night, I want to see the Joker become the Joker. And so you're watching Arthur Fleck, finally be seen. And the film is asking you to empathize with this character. So when he finally does achieve his origin, and when he finally does don his costume for the first time, you're like, yeah! But also, no.
Yeah.
But some people don't have that no.
And and I think that
That's interesting.
that is interesting. but that is also what people are concerned about.
Yeah, sure.
Now,
I do think the wrong mind watching this movie is going to get the wrong ideas about this film.
right. And I just want to come down on the side of, I don't think that that's the film's fault.
No, not at all.
And I compare it a lot to the film Fight Club. You just unplugged my cans.
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I got it.
Where it's just like, yeah, when I saw film Fight Club for the first time, I really was intrigued by that movie. I think it's a really good and amazing movie. But you go on a first date with a guy and he says that his favorite movie of all time is Fight Club. You maybe
Marry that
not
guy.
go on
Oh.
that second date. You know what I mean?
Well,
like
yeah.
it's a little bit of a red flag kind of film.
I think it, Fight Club, that's a perfect example. Like, that has been interpreted in a variety of ways, and a lot of those ways that movie has been interpreted turns me off of the film. It is interesting how a conversation around a movie can sour you to that movie, and that could very well happen to Joker for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But right now, I'm going to just say that I come down on the side of thinking that this is a really good movie. Is it a movie for me? I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I've been pondering it for a while. I like it. I gave it 3.5 on Letterboxd, but it's a movie I've been thinking about more and more, and I don't know if I necessarily like the way it makes me feel. But
Sure.
again, I think all cinema is not supposed to make you feel
Right.
great. I mean, that's not the purpose or the point of all cinema. I think it's supposed to make you think about certain things, and I think that's what this movie does.
And this movie really does, like, it's speaking to our time.
Exactly. So
I came out going, this is a 3, because I liked the movie. I appreciated the movie and what it's trying to say. But is it a movie for me necessarily? Right now, I don't know. But I've got to say, since talking to Brad about it, and I'm sure talking to you guys about it, I mean, it's growing on me.
yeah.
Okay. You want to start with your good?
Yeah, so I guess we could start at the obvious, which is Joaquin Phoenix. I mean, I think he gives a damn good performance in this film. I mean, he's pretty much in every frame of the movie. I don't think there's a scene without him in it, and he really.
There are a few
There's
that
a
are
few?
very interesting.
Okay.
But yes.
Okay. Hey, I've only seen it once, but with that being said, I think he just gives a phenomenal performance carrying this film and going through this journey of Arthur Fleck and where he goes from the beginning of this film to ultimately where he ends up towards the end. I think the conversation and the commentary that it is making on mental illness is a profound one, and I thought that was really exemplified well in the scene where you're kind of in his head, which plays into the unreliable narrator part of the film as well, which I had some issues with, which we'll talk about. But that scene where he sees himself in the audience of the Murray Franklin show, and Murray Franklin calls him out and calls him up. Because
Something I would do all the time as a kid, by the way.
yeah, because that was something at that point. I got that standpoint of Arthur's character because I think everybody has probably done that to some degree, and I could definitely see somebody with a mental illness because there's a point where I'm trying to figure out how to say this. Like the things that we've seen in our society now, especially like with school shootings and a lot of people that are causing these heinous acts, you hear a lot about people saying, a lot of times they want notoriety. They're always saying, I want a TV movie made about me. I want this fame.
They want to
want
be
this.
seen. They want to
wanna
be heard. They want to be acknowledged.
Exactly. And that to me was the beginning of Arthur having himself be seen, and also where that ends up going towards the end of the film to a deeper and darker place. But I like seeing that particular scene in that moment because I thought we started to see the beginnings of how that thought process starts to kind of manifest in somebody that is deeply sick and ill. So
Also, to the comment of the portrayal of mental illness, I think the message about how when a social structure is falling apart, like it's falling apart in Gotham, one of the first things to go is support, monetary, financial support for people who are dealing with mental illness. They are the first people to end up off meds and living on the street.
Absolutely. And that's another thing, too, because I think the movie speaks to not just because a lot of the conversation around this film, and we've just talked about it at the beginning of this podcast, is like people focusing on, is this going to activate and incite violence because of, is it glorifying the character of Arthur Fleck? But to me, the movie itself is commenting on the mental illness part, but I think it's also an indictment on the society or on a system that has failed these people as well. And I think the movie does that in a great job portraying that.
But I also identify with the person who goes like, it's hard enough to be a mentally ill person and how it's portrayed today, how it's viewed today, and how it's represented today. We had this conversation briefly when we were talking about Ma, where do we want the message about mental illness to be, if a person is mentally ill, if you don't treat them well, they're going to kill you?
I think the depiction of mental illness in Joker in some ways, or maybe even in a lot of ways, is pretty tired and cliche.
Yeah, that volatility.
But to Brian's point of view, the commentary on the structure that is deteriorating.
Yeah.
Like, I love, it's set in the 80s, but the 80s that it is set in is the 80s of Martin Scorsese's Taxi Driver, of Michael Winner's Death Wish. It's that 80s New York that is a hellhole, is a pure nightmare. And the imagery that they use is straight from how New York was seen through the media
Super
in the
Rats.
80s.
Super Rats, yeah.
Super Rats,
The trash,
garbage
yeah.
strike. Like, for me, like the piles of garbage that are piling over and over and over again and how they become jokes on the Murray Franklin show is really, really interesting.
Yeah.
And how they use that 80s New York to also be a mirror to 2019 America.
Because you know what? In some places, it's still like that.
Right.
It still looks like that. You just don't see it. You don't hear about it because, like in the movie, it's stepped over or it's ignored.
And the apathy that is born from not being able to fix these things.
Yeah.
And how we all then dismiss each other as humans because of this broken system.
And I think that that's a large part of, to me, my frustrations with the critiques of the film or its potential influence is that people are focusing on, this movie is going to possibly incite violence. They're focusing on the movie, and they're focusing on the people who are susceptible to influence from this movie, instead of looking at and they also say that this movie is guilty of trying to humanize the villain, where my opinion is, if this person were viewed as a human being from the beginning by society, maybe he would have been less likely to even become a villain. If society were to see him as an equal, as a human being, then people wouldn't feel invisible. They wouldn't feel a need to draw attention to themselves because no one notices I'm here, so let me do something to stand out. Yeah. So if you're acknowledging someone's presence and existence, if you're acknowledging someone's humanity, then you can nip a lot of that shit in the bud. And so the fact that you have a lot of people, and I'm not saying this is for every scenario, but I'm saying, like, we have a society who fails, who thinks it's a bad thing to look at people as human beings. So, quick example. The police officer, last name Geiger, the ex-police officer who shot and killed that guy, right? A lot of people would damn her and say, well, she deserves to go to jail or get the death sentence or whatever. The victim's brother looked at her as a human being and said, I don't wish ill upon you. I love you like anyone else, and asked the judge permission to give that lady a hug at her sentencing. Mm-hmm. That is extremely profound. And he had every right to be angry, vindictive towards that lady, want revenge, want her to rot, want her to die, whatever. But he still saw past her horrific actions, whether it be intentional, purposeful, or not, whatever, and still saw a human being there. And so it takes a lot. And I'm not saying it's easy to do, but I feel like a lot of people lose sight of the fact that at the end of the day, these things that happen and transpire, the people that do these horrific things, they're human beings. And at some point in time, someone failed to see them as such. And I feel like a lot of the times that can lead to someone becoming the villain. And I'm not saying that excuses what they do, but what I'm saying is if you're going to put that much effort into saying that, these people should be condemned, you shouldn't humanize a villain, but how much effort are you putting into helping people who are hurting, who feel invisible, who feel like no one sees them, who need help, who reach out? How much effort are you putting into another human being to make them feel like a human being so they don't have to turn into fucking monsters?
Right. And I am always an advocate for bottomless empathy. And that's why we have the arts. That's why we have film.
Yeah.
As a way to put you in other people's shoes. I'm just saying, and I'm not saying that this is a criticism of Joker. I'm saying that this is a criticism of all film and all of the films that I've seen that have been made thus far. Is we go, let's make sure that we present mental illness in every aspect that it can be. We need to tell, if we're going to tell this story again and again, that mental illness makes serial killers, we also have to tell the story that mental illness makes inventors, mental illness makes heroes, mental illness makes empathetic people, mental illness makes angels, right? We have to make sure that we are representing mental illness in every single facet instead of just the warning of, if you don't treat someone with mental illness as a human being, they will shoot you.
But what's tricky about a thing like Joker is that we are watching the Joker story, a character that we know is going to become the foil of Batman, a character that we are coming to see become the monster. And so that confuses everything.
Exactly.
Which is what's kind of exciting and interesting about the whole experience.
Yeah. But I'll end my good there. I mean, there's a lot more that I like, but I'm pretty sure everybody, and we can chime in on that. But yeah, that's pretty much what I wanted to say about my good so far.
Wife Dork.
Yes. Brian has already covered some of my good. That is absolutely wonderful. I'm going to say that my good is Arthur's relationship to his mother. So his mother is played by Frances Conroy, and we see him at the beginning of the film as the caretaker of his aging mother. But then as his story unfolds, we find out that Arthur has been the entire support system for his aging mother, who is also a person who is dealing with mental illness, something that Arthur, in his limited capacity as just a regular guy and a person with mental illness, could not recognize. So that's just another layer of the lack of the support system.
And a person who was in a system and was expelled from the system.
Yeah. So
left to dry.
Another symbol of that crumbling infrastructure. And the crumbling infrastructure of Gotham is another thing that falls underneath my good. Gotham, in the comic books, is an ugly place. It is, if you take the bad streets of every large city in America and put them all in one place, that is what Gotham has always been.
Corruption and selfishness.
Exactly.
Manifested.
And that is the kind of place that breeds supervillains, like the Joker, but it is also a place that breeds vigilantes and breeds heroes like Batman. I don't want to stumble too much into this good. I'm sure that the revelation at the end of the film about Batman is going to be in other people's good. So I don't want to hog that. What else can I include in my good? I did, as a comedy nerd, I did find it thrilling to see Gary Gulman. So when the Joker goes to study his stand-up comedy,
the role play comedy bit guy.
Gary Gulman does one of his. It plays the comedian on the stage, and he does one of his own bits. That's an original bit by Gary Gulman about doing sexual role play with his girlfriend, and he's the professor.
yeah.
And then he ends up just assigning a lot of homework to his girlfriend. That's the punchline of that. And I think that's so fun.
I'm glad you told me that because the audio trails off, and I'm like, I want to hear the
yeah.
punchline.
Gary Goldman has a stand-up special coming out on HBO. I think it might be out today, as in the day that, yes, it came out on October 5th. So it came out yesterday.
Okay.
I highly recommend him. Brad and I have seen him live at the Sixth and I. Talk about advocates for mental illness. Gary Goldman is a person who's been dealing with depression his entire life. And his latest special is about his dealing with that. So when he was a high schooler, he was on the football team, and then he ended up getting a full ride scholarship to his school for being on a football team. But then while he was on that team, he was suffering crippling depression in a environment that is not sympathetic to that kind of thing. And I think that he has a really insightful narrative about what it's like to live with clinical depression. So yay. And then also Mark Maron, another wonderful stand-up comedian who has a lot of insight on mental illness, is in this film. He shows up at the end of the movie as Murray's kind of handler. His handler guy
with the beard guy, he didn't feel good about having him on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. He
from Glow.
Yeah, from Glow.
Oh, I didn't see.
But Brad and I have also seen him live, and he has
Also at the Six and I, weirdly.
At the Six and I, he did a tour for his book. We also saw him at the
Improv
convention hall.
Oh yeah.
He's wonderful.
The DAR. Yeah.
Yeah. So as a comedy nerd, I enjoyed seeing those people.
Okay.
And some of my good was Brian's, and some of my good is going to be Brad's. So I'll just go ahead and pass it on.
But you're good, B.
Well, just from a couple technical things, the cinematography by Lawrence Sher is
stunning,
amazing, right? And then the score by Hildur, I'm gonna mess up your name, Hildur. I apologize. Guanadator. She's the same person who did the score for Arrival, Sicario, The Revenant.
Wow.
So she's one of the best composers on the planet right now. And the fact that I can't pronounce her name is embarrassing. But the score of Joker is awesome. But to my ultimate good,
yes,
why I ended up loving the movie is how the film how it relates to the character of Batman. And, in the context of the movie, Bruce Wayne is a child. Thomas Wayne is this Donald Trump-like figure, who's running for mayor, who represents the 1%, who doesn't really relate to the 99%. And in the wake of the Bernie Getz-like shootings on the subway caused by Arthur, refers to that element of his citizenry as clowns, which then sparks this movement, this protest, this rage of the city that reflects Arthur's feelings. And now finally Arthur feels like his emotions are being experienced by the city, being understood by the city. And he also learns from his mother, because his mother's been writing these letters to Thomas Wayne, and he cracks one open and sees that his mother claims that Arthur is the spawn of Thomas Wayne. And at that moment in the movie, you can hear everyone in the theater go like, what Joker and Batman are brothers. Oh my God. But then it is revealed maybe that is a falsity, that Mrs. Fleck Penny is actually suffering from a mental illness and delusion.
I think that's proved absolutely, because...
But you missed the photograph at the end, Lisa.
Oh, shit.
Because at the end of the film, when Arthur is looking at a photograph of his mother, you do see a note from Thomas Wayne commenting on her looks. And it's signed TW.
Yeah.
Now, is that a fake signature that was done by his mom?
But what about the adoption papers? Like, why would you have to adopt a child?
That's correct.
Okay.
But we don't know what the extent of that relationship was. I'm just saying that there is a little doubt because of that photograph.
There was definitely
and
some
also,
Me Too action.
there's a lot of doubt in relation to Arthur's POV in general, because
Right.
he is an unreliable narrator.
Yeah.
I also agree with you, Brian. I want to talk about that in the bad.
Yeah.
So Arthur goes to confront Bruce. He sees Bruce, and there's this really cool moment where he does a magic trick for Bruce through the gate. He puts his fingers. Bruce is a boy who always frowns, and Arthur sees no, you got to put it on a happy face. Let me put on a happy face for you, and I love that as going into the future of Batman and Joker's relationship. Joker is always infuriated that Batman is such a stern being, is the ultimate serious person. So here is Joker with a young Bruce Wayne forcing a smile on him. I kind of like how that plays out in the possible future. But then going to the last scene of the movie, after everything has happened and Arthur is back in the sanatorium, and he's laughing to himself, and the social worker says, what's so funny, and he goes, you wouldn't get it. We get a flash of Bruce Wayne in the alley with two giant super rats running behind him. Loved how that carried through. And what I love about that moment is the last laugh, the punchline of the film, doesn't belong to Arthur. It belongs to Batman. And I love that there is this idea that Arthur has been working to this moment where he wants everyone to understand and see and experience his rage. He wants people to feel the pain that he feels, and that's what the Joker does. And Batman has also gone through that pain, has also experienced that misery, that rage. And what he does with that rage in the future is he makes sure no one will ever experience it. He's the opposite of Arthur. He's the opposite of the Joker. He is going to go on and don this costume and fight crime because he doesn't want any other boys to know the pain that he's experienced and the pain that Arthur has experienced. And so if you removed all the Thomas Wayne stuff and all the Bruce Wayne stuff from the Joker movie, I don't think I would like this film at all. But as a film within the context of 80 years of Batman continuity, I really like it. And I love the idea that the Joker doesn't even understand what the joke is. He doesn't understand that he is about to be challenged. That he is not getting his victory. He is not getting the last laugh. The person he's created is.
That's what I love, that parallel idea. Like, with the idea of a Joker movie, we become obsessed with what produces a Joker. Like, trauma, lack of a support system.
And this speaks to what your complaint was just a little while
lack
ago.
of infrastructure. That's what makes a Joker. But also, trauma, lack of infrastructure. There's nobody addressing the situation because there is corruption in the infrastructure. That same condition also produces a Batman. So, I feel like we're getting so bogged down in the narrative of, could I be a Joker? Could my neighbor be a Joker? Can that person I see on the street, can that person be a Joker? But the question should also be, am I a Batman? Could he be a Batman? Is this situation producing Batman? Look for the Batman. That's what Mr. Rogers said.
And that last scene, when you get the cut back to Bruce Wayne in the alley, it happens in the laugh. It happens in the laugh. What's so funny? You wouldn't get it. Joker doesn't get it. That is brilliant.
Brad and I have opposing viewpoints on what that laugh means. Brad feels like the laugh means that Joker doesn't get it. I think the laugh means that Joker does get it.
You think Joker knows that he has created his opposite or his rival?
I think that he understands that the circumstances will create his rival. I wouldn't say that he knows who his rival is.
Yeah, I don't know. I like my version better.
I know, and I like my version better. That
And
idea
that's art.
of that clarity.
Yeah. So, yeah. And of course, I think Joaquin's really good in the role. I think everybody's really good in the role.
Yeah.
I love the Murray Franklin bit.
Yeah.
I love the way that dance is used.
Oh, yeah.
Like Arthur, when he's feeling himself, the first thing that he feels inside is inside his own body. And he turns into like, he's part vaudeville, he is part classic cinema. You know, he is a showman, and like a showman is a triple threat. A showman can dance. And the way that Joaquin Phoenix uses physicality in this role, I think is really transcendent.
Okay. My good is all the same, like the acting across the board. It's always a pleasure to see Shea Wingham in the film. Even though he was in it for a small bit. You know, even with what little Zazie Beetz was as far as her presence in the film, I love.
You can't help but fall under her spell like he does.
Yeah, it's you know, just the not any sort of grand performance, but just a lot of subtlety in her looks, in her reactions. You know,
Brian Tyree Henry, same deal.
Man, seeing him pop, I don't know that I knew. I felt like when we saw it on that Tuesday, that press screening, I felt like I didn't know that he was in the film, but just seeing him pop up and stuff now, especially such high profile things, it always brings me joy because, like with Zazie Beetz, another Atlanta alumni, so it was good to see both of them too in the film. It's always good to see them take whatever role that they have and do so much with it without overacting, with just feeling very natural in their performance. Like the last thing I saw Brian Tyree Henry is, if I want to say, was Child's Play, was the new Chucky movie.
I haven't seen that yet.
And as you know, goofy and outlandish as that movie is, he was, as far as the most grounded and, you know, relatable character, he was great in that. And so
another movie that he stars opposite of Joker, Mark Hamill.
Oh yeah. Oh shit. That's right. That's right. Look at this guy. So yeah. But the main thing I took away from it, because I saw it again on Sunday, also at the Tyson's AMC, but I saw it in their IMAX. Did you see?
No.
Okay, look. You think you were taken aback by the cinematography in your regular screening? I gotta say, because some movies that show in IMAX, they will still, even in the Tyson's is not and I've said this before, Tyson's is not a true quote unquote IMAX screen. I'm doing the air quotes, but it is a larger screen ratio wise compared to regular auditoriums, right?
It there too.
And so sometimes movies that are shown in there, like Hobbs and Shaw, for instance, we saw it in there. Even in that auditorium, you still have black bars at the top and bottom, so it doesn't even fill out the full aspect ratio. Joker, on the other hand, the entire film, not just certain scenes, was blown up from floor to ceiling. And I tell you, if you're someone who can appreciate cinematography and its language within context to the narrative and or character, and also it being another character in the film, man, be like, there are shots in there because of the framing. Lawrence Sher, I would be curious to know if this was intentional or not, but Arthur Fleck is swallowed up by Gotham. Like he is dwarfed by his environment. He feels like he is being crushed or stifled by the brick, by the grime, by the circumstance. And that opening shot when he's beaten by those kids and he's laying in the alley, when we saw it that Tuesday night on that regular screen, I don't know about you. Let me ask you this: when he's laying there and he's just sobbing in that puddle, and the camera pulls back and it says Joker. That screening, it was okay. Boom, title card, Joker. When I saw it on the IMAX screen today, because of that aspect ratio, he looked so small in that alleyway, and it was off-putting and weird to me at first. And I go, is that something? Was that like a rack focus? Like, what the fuck is going on? Because he looks so little, and the city in the background, the trash on the sides, just within that framing, he looks. And then the way that he looked and how that made me feel, coupled with what I'm seeing and how he's feeling or assuming he's feeling in that moment with what happened.
And the fact that the title card then takes up the entire frame.
Right. So I don't know, like it went a long way to translating Arthur's pain of feeling insignificant in Gotham, feeling you can understand why maybe he would be overlooked because he's such a small thing in this large metropolis, right? And so other scenes in the film would just lend themselves to that feeling, and I found it very striking. Like, holy shit, like it almost feels criminal not to have it shown this way in every. It feels like you're cheating the audience something if you don't show. That's the scene when he's following Zazie Beetz' character to Gotham Savings Bank, and it's that shot she goes in the bank, and we're seeing him from a distance. We're across the street. He's across the street, and he kind of has his hood up, and he kind of doubles back. He kind of chickens out as far as following her in there. Well, when we saw it initially, I'm thinking, I'm just looking at the literal aspect of that, of him basically stalking her or whatever. But in my second viewing on that IMAX screen, that aspect is still there of him stalking her, but it again, like everything around him seems so small that it at once puts focus on Arthur, but also you almost lose him in Gotham, and it seems like he would not stand out as somebody following a woman. Like, he wouldn't stand out as someone you should be keeping an eye on because he looks dangerous or suspicious. That lady should be worried. How can she not see him? He gets lost in everything. So again, he can be overlooked, right? He just blends in. And so that was just really striking to me, coupled with the score. So the score sounds grandiose in any aspect ratio, but coupled with the larger aspect ratio, that particular scene specifically, there are these horns and strings that are playing, and it just adds another texture to the film when I'm watching that. And then, I speak a lot about the wide shots and things like that, but also that aspect ratio lends itself tremendously to the close-ups, which triumphantly there are so many when you're dealing with Arthur and his eyes, and when you're dealing with Joaquin Phoenix and just his craft of how he wants to convey what is going on in his characters in mind. Which again, there's a thing going on with the unreliable narrator. So on my second viewing, I'm going, I'm looking into his eyes. His face is blown up tremendously on this big screen, and I'm wondering what's going on. But then knowing like he's an unreliable narrator, like my assumptions about what he's thinking probably could be so far off, and it just gives you such a huge visage and a huge window to gaze in upon, to extrapolate whatever you feel in that moment. So I just feel like, that the cinematography to me was a huge part of why I had the viewing experience I did on the second go around compared to my first go around. I don't know, like I said, in speaking with the cinematographer, I'd be curious to know his state of mind, his headspace when framing Arthur with that large aspect rate, because it was shot. It wasn't shot. It may not have been shot on your standard IMAX cameras for the Smithsonian ones, but it was shot on the larger, the smaller compact IMAX camera for the wider aspect ratio. So I'd be curious to know the cinematographer's headspace and the meaning behind certain framing of the film. But yeah, that's my good for the most part. Brian, the bad.
The bad for me, going to the use of the unreliable narrator. We see in the beginning the scene that I did like in the with him going inside his head in the Murray Franklin show. But then we talked a little bit about Zazie Beetz and how that plays out, and the reveal that all of that was happening in his head. I just don't know how I really feel about that, or if that was even necessary in the film overall.
Are you talking about, so we get the reveal that she is, like, he was having this imaginary relationship with her.
Yeah.
Are you talking about the whole idea of the whole imaginary relationship, or that moment where they flash back to all of these scenes? Because this also overlaps with my bad.
Yeah, I guess the whole thing, and that's what I'm trying to. That's why.
You're saying that whole relationship could go out?
Well, yeah, because I know they're playing with the fact that it is in his head, and of course when he has the first interaction with her in the elevator, and it all goes to the blow to the head and how that comes around. But then once we get that reveal when he walks into her apartment to realize that none of this actually really happened, I don't know like how that plays out within the context of the story, or even if that was
To
even
me,
necessary.
I think that is to emphasize how he's part of a cycle, because it imitates what happened with his mother and Thomas Wayne. So his mother had this whole imaginary relationship with Thomas Wayne. Now he's having this entire imaginary relationship with his mother. And then
with Zazie Beetz.
With Zazie Beetz.
Yeah.
I'm getting so ahead of myself. But the idea that even though, according to the file, Arthur and his mother are not blood relatives.
Yeah.
But because of his trauma, the
His
trauma
injury
done
to
to
his
him
head.
by
Yeah.
his mother,
Yeah.
he is having parallel psychosis. So he is having delusions of grandeur,
Yeah.
just like his mother.
Yeah.
I like that idea.
I love the idea. And can I just jump into my bad then?
Well, are you going to say the thing I'm about to say? Because we discussed it in the car.
No, I'm not. You can say your thing. You can say your thing.
To me, my thing is like, once we have that realization that maybe his relationship with Zazie Beetz was imaginary, and she is having that moment of, please just get out of my apartment, for them to go back and then show the flashbacks of all of the instances he thought he was with Zazie Beetz and he was not, was overkill. To me, it's just like,
That's a studio note.
Well,
That's,
yeah.
That,
I mean,
that's like an audience is not going to pick that up unless you
So let's
ram it
visually
down their
show
head.
it.
but
Yeah.
everything about this movie is saying that it's not for the every audience. So you're already making
Yeah, I
an
mean,
art
yeah.
piece anyway. So why go back?
That's not how Warner Brothers sees it.
I know, but to me, like, if
I
I'm
agree with
saying what's bad about a film
Yeah.
that could be potentially very, very good.
But you're right, because I think also that you really didn't have to show that, because we already introduced that, and I think that plays into the end of the movie as well, when he gets hit by the ambulance and they drag him out of the car. Does that really happen in that way?
That's my thing. That's where my bad comes in.
Right.
All right. I love the unreliable narrator idea.
Yeah.
And for the most part, how it's executed in the first half of the movie.
Yeah.
I agree, Lisa, that we didn't need all those flashbacks. That is very, obvious.
I think it's gauche.
It's gauche. It's gauche. But I wish they would push the unreliable narrator a little further. If I had any complaint, I'd like that explored even deeper. Okay. So we first kind of are introduced to his fantasy through the Murray Franklin show. We watch him be pulled down on stage and have a hug with Murray Franklin. And then you realize that's all in his head. Mm-hmm. And then we see him do his stage show. And he gets out there and he does his jokes. And as he spreads his arms, it cuts to Sinatra music, I want to say, at the time. And we hear applause and everyone's, hearing him perfectly. We now know later in the film that that's the moment that some guy with a phone, or I guess not a phone because it's the 80s, but like a full-on camcorder is recording Arthur so that it can be played on the Murray Franklin show, so that he can be mocked on the Murray Franklin show. And then we have the revelation that his whole relationship with Zazie Beetz didn't happen. Mm-hmm. And when that happens, you go, oh, so what can we trust?
Yeah, what is real?
And from that point forward, you go,
Is any of this
is
happening?
any of this happening?
Yeah.
Are those clown people pulling him out of the police car and championing him and genuflecting to him? Yeah. Does Thomas Wayne punch him in the bathroom? Does that conversation happen? And then, at the very end, when we cut to him back in the asylum, it's this bleached out look. It looks unlike anything else in the movie, except for the flashback that we learned that Arthur was in an asylum before. And when we see him in that flashback banging his head against the wall, it's that same bleached out color palette. So, I've seen people online go like, did any of this movie happen? Everything before the final scene is all in Arthur's head. I don't believe that.
Because if that's true, then the whole breeding of Batman thing didn't happen.
And like the scenes that are without there are scenes that happen without Arthur,
Right.
you know,
Right.
and I guess you could say, well, that's all still a figment of his imagination, but it doesn't work for me, given the context of 80 years of Batman comics. But so like, I kind of wish they pushed the unreliable narrator in a few more scenes, or at least one more scene.
Okay.
Because of rule of threes.
No, just because, like, once you introduce it, it's then let go, and you're left to question. And maybe that's the point also.
Yeah.
But I kind of would have liked another little, you know, I would have liked to have waded into the waters of his delusion a little bit more at the end.
Yeah. I guess my only other bad I don't even know if it's a bad now, because hearing you talk about the Batman aspect of the film, I don't know. I'm a little. I guess now I'm a little bit easier on it after hearing you kind of talk about it, because I didn't know how I felt about having a lot of the Batman stuff in the film, because it felt like what Todd Phillips and Warner Brothers was looking to do was really just kind of do this more as a character study, and I thought that you really could have told the story about Arthur Fleck without even really
you totally
having
could have.
the Joker in it.
Yeah.
And it just felt like
It's called Taxi Driver and King of Comedy.
yeah. And I think that it could have, I don't know, it's just something about having those scenes with Batman in it felt like, okay, we still have to tie this into the comic book lore of, you know, Batman mythology.
I understand, and like, if that's your complaint, I mean, I totally get it. But personally, for me, if you remove this from the movie, I don't like the movie.
Yeah,
The whole movie rests on the Batman.
Well, that's what, and when you said that, I mean, it now is making me kind of think a little bit more, looking at it from that perspective of the Bruce Wayne character, but watching it initially, because going into it following this more of a character study, and then seeing how they tried to tie it into the mythology, which I thought was still really done well, but I just didn't know how, if that's the movie that I wanted to see. But I liked your explanation of it, so it might sit with me.
Joker without Batman is entirely too bleak.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
we've
It's
spent
Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer.
Yeah, we've spent a lot of time looking into what creates a Batman. We've seen that movie retold again and again and again. We've seen the Pearls, we've seen him go to the movies, we've seen him go to the opera.
Like, the last thing on the planet I wanted to see was the Waynes get shot again. I swear to God. I did not want to see that again.
Yeah.
But at the end of the Joker, where you go like, Gotham is breeding supervillains, you need that idea of Batman. Like, to me, that is what makes this film emotionally, to me, redeemable.
And morally redeemable for me.
And, like, because I do have faith in humanity. I can go to that dark place and go, like, everybody has a right to be hurt. And everybody has a right to be mad. And there is, like, and things need to happen. Things need to happen. But does it have to be Joker things? Can it be Batman things?
Yeah.
I mean, like, did I need a Joker movie in my life? No. But the Joker movie that I got, if we're going to watch a Joker movie, this is pretty much the Joker movie I would have wanted.
There's no
unless you
other-
were going to do like a Cesar Romero Joker movie, because I'm still waiting for that version of the cinematic Batman.
That's maybe why the origins of Joker have been kept necessarily mysterious. Because the only thing that could make a character like Joker, as he exists in the comics, is the saddest story ever told, and that is what we get.
Yeah, and I recently reread Batman the Killing Joke by Alan Moore and Brian Boland. And what I like about that book, I think it is a very dated book and, you know, has its own issues with misogyny and blah, blah, blah. What I like about that idea where they try to bring Batman and the Joker together, you know, the Joker escapes from Arkham and he sets up this gauntlet for Commissioner Gordon. And he says, Batman, I am going to show you that you and I are the same, and we're all just one bad day from insanity. And if I torture this person in the same fashion that we were tortured, we will break this person. And we go to the end of the Killing Joke, and Commissioner Gordon is not broken by the tortures that he succumbs to. He does continue to be the strong individual that we knew him to be. we don't all react to trauma in the same fashion. And the Joker film is talking to that idea in some ways, like Alan Moore and Brian Boland were. Of course, that Killing Joke, if you start talking about the ending, like, did Batman kill Joker? Did he not kill Joker? I say he did kill Joker, blah, 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 blah. But, like, I like the idea of we meet misery. We all have rage. We all have frustration. We all have anger, but we all choose to react to that differently. And that's what I responded to in Joker.
Yeah, I mean, I think our conversation here, I'm coming around on that whole aspect of the film as well. And also, I just like the idea of hopefully this stays a one-off film.
Oh, God, it has to.
Yeah, and the fact that it is a one-off film and we do get, like, the beginnings of the Batman, but not seeing that and just seeing, like, how that kind of starts. I like that idea. I like the idea of Batman in this world and seeing, like, the origins of that, so to speak. So,
and I feel like it works because we had an 80-year history with Batman.
Right.
We already seen that movie.
Yeah. We know.
Many times over,
Yeah.
right?
Right. But we've never seen this.
Another version of Joker that Brad and I found ourselves talking a lot about after seeing Joker is Tom King's Batman as presented in, I just Googled it, but we talked about it on our podcast, DC Nation #0, where Batman and Catwoman are getting married and the Joker is waiting for his invitation. Because in Joker's perspective, he is the other side of Batman's coin. Batman could not, the idea of Batman could not exist without his idea of the Joker.
He's chaos, Batman's
is
order. Yeah.
And then later, in this same series, Joker shows up at Batman and Catwoman's wedding.
Well, not really. He shows up at somebody's wedding and lures them in.
Oh, yeah, that's right. And then he kills everybody at that wedding. And Catwoman and Joker are lying next to each other, both fatally wounded, and just talk about each other's relationship to Batman. Catwoman's relationship to Batman and Joker's relationship to Batman.
There is a Catman.
And there is a Catman, but we're not talking about him.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
But it's this idea that they are irrevocably linked.
Yeah, yeah. And like my final, like, we're in the bad. I shouldn't be saying this, but I thought of a good is Joker's laugh in this film. Like the variety of laughs in this film. Like when I read The Killing Joke, and when that Joker goes into different voices, I hear the Joaquin Phoenix voice. It's weird. Like when I finally heard in his stand-up routine when he mimics his mom and he's like, I won't ever do that. I was like, oh my God, that's the Joker's mocking voice in The Killing Joke. And I never heard that voice before. And it just really connected to me. Like his forced laugh, his conditioned laugh. We haven't even talked about how the fact like the knock on the head has caused him to laugh went uncontrollably. But like that laugh and then his like purposeful laugh and then his real giggle. Like the variety of laughter in this film I also really enjoyed.
Yeah. But that's probably the majority of my bad.
Oh,
Excuse me, my bad. Yeah.
And that also covered my bad.
that covered my bad.
Oh.
Okay.
Darren, do you have any more bads?
No.
We're doing good. This is very efficient.
The ugly.
What's ugly about Joker, Brian?
You know what kind of disturbed me, and it's not necessarily the film, but it's just how people are reacting to this Joker in a positive way.
Well, yeah, at least his audience.
Yeah, and I'm gonna go a little bit deeper where I get a lot of my geek shirts from like Shirt Punch and Ripped Apparel, and so they have like these daily shirts, and now they're having like a lot of merchandise, and now they have these shirts for Joaquin Phoenix's Joker, and I'm like,
can I put that on my chest?
I'm just like, this is not the type of character that I want to be merchandised. Or I want people
dare
to...
I say this?
Do it.
The pot calling the kettle
Do
black.
it.
Who's that?
Brian right now, listeners, is
are
wearing
you
a
wearing?
Punisher shirt.
Yeah, I mean,
The
it's
American flag skull.
I just want a navy blue shirt. I did buy the shirt. Yeah.
Talk about, like, because Punisher is
Yeah.
a character that we see portrayed in kind of common culture as this
The police
hero.
have adopted it. The military have adopted
True.
his
And the
logo.
Punisher is a straight up murderer.
He's a serial
Psychopath.
killer. He's
A
a psychopath.
serial-
A
Yeah.
very broken individual.
True.
And so, like, going back to my conversation about Fight Club, where psychotic characters are presented as the center of a film, and people take that as they may.
So Lisa and I have had this conversation a lot in nerd culture because I love buying T-shirts. I love buying action figures. I love buying statues. Should I have Darth Vader T-shirts?
I mean, I worked at a Catholic school.
Should I have a Hydra shirt?
Preschoolers,
Isn't a Hydra symbol just the swastika?
preschoolers come to their music class wearing a Darth Vader shirt, and I'm like, you know, that's the space
Like-
Hitler, right?
Should I have a shirt that has the Imperial logo on it?
No. No, I would never allow my child to wear a Darth
These
Vader
are things
shirt.
I never would have thought about until I got married to this lady.
I mean, yeah, I agree to a certain extent that, I mean, I just think for me it's just the portrayal of that particular character. I'm not saying that, like villains or anything shouldn't be merchandise or we shouldn't have Darth Vader shirts.
I think
or
you should
anything
think
like
about
that.
it.
To me, like I say, create, like, movies are empathy machines. Create the portraits of a serial killer. Create these anti-heroes. But celebrate them? That's fucked up.
I mean, it depends. I think it depends on the interpretation of that character, right? Like Joker specifically. Do I want to wear a shirt of Joaquin Phoenix's Joker?
Do you want to identify as part of his team? Do you want to wear a
But
team jersey for Team
Over
Joker?
your shoulder, Lisa, is Jerry Robinson's Joker from Detective Comics, a Mondo print that we have.
That's a piece of art. I'm not wearing that on my bod.
Yeah, but I mean, I would wear that Jerry Robinson Joker on my pod. He's a genie, Lisa. He's a genie coming out of a lamp with a couple of pistols on tiny Batman and Robin. Like, I don't know. Like, I think you can get lost in, like, I'm wearing this Joker shirt and therefore I am celebrating a psychotic serial killer. I mean, I don't know if that's necessarily true. I don't know if I'd wear an Imperial logo anymore. I don't know if I'd wear a Hydra logo. I don't know if I'd wear the Punisher logo. But that Jerry Robinson Joker, I'm still going to wear, damn it. And Darth Vader, he's a struggling human being.
Yeah, like I said, for me, it's just the portrayal of that, like you say, the interpretation of that particular
And how it
character.
affected you.
Yeah, and just the movie and what the movie was going for, and to just take that and use it in this particular type of way. Like I said, the Punisher, you look at something like, Warzone, that's kind of, violent but kind of cartoon. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm not trying to justify it, but I'm just saying, for me, this particular interpretation and to see how it's kind of being used, it just something just about it just feels.
I mean, it's kind of like when, people have like a Freddy Krueger t-shirt on too. You're like, he's a pedophile, right? He's a pedophile serial killer.
I do have one
Like,
Freddy
I feel weird about it.
shirt.
But guess what? So do I.
It says "Follow your dreams," but it is ironic.
But like, I think you make those symbols work for you, and I think there are ways that I could justify wearing a Joaquin Phoenix shirt at some point in my future, a Joaquin Phoenix Joker, but not right now. And I do worry about how people read that movie and go like, "Yeah, man, we should all be the Joker."
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, I don't think that that's the movie's fault.
No, I think
No.
I think that's
humans.
No,
human
no,
fault.
yeah. I'm just saying. When you talk
But it
about
is a good
ugly,
argument.
But what's the difference between wearing a Joaquin Phoenix Joker shirt and any Joker shirt?
That's what we're saying.
Every Joker, Heath Ledger's Joker, every comic book Joker, Killing Joke Joker, the one with the camera on T-shirts, like they've all done some heinous shit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what's the difference?
Well, the difference is the interpretation.
It's the
I
interpretation
agree
of
with
this-
Brian.
of this
Like,
movie.
you have to make it. You have to understand. How do you relate to this image? How do you relate to this art? And are you comfortable wearing this image on your chest? And they are different. Jokers are different. Jerry Robinson's Joker is different than Jared Leto's Joker is different than Heath Ledger's, is different than Jack Nicholson's, and how they are filtered through the lens of their art, the lens of their narrative that they're put into.
Yeah, like I said, like for me, it's just like watching Arthur Fleck and this character and how he deals with mental illness, and how watching that affected me. And then like if I see somebody cosplaying as that, then it's just like I don't know. It'll affect me differently than seeing somebody cosplay as Heath Ledger's Joker, because that interpretation in the Christopher Nolan trilogy or that The Dark Knight is different, and we're looking at that Joker, at least I'm looking at it differently than the way I'm looking at Joaquin Phoenix's Joker as a character study of this person's descent into, insanity or whatever. It's just, I don't know. It's just, that's just the way I see it.
When I was growing up, it's Halloween season. We are now officially in October.
Mm.
Growing up, I was never allowed to wear a costume that could be construed as evil. I was never allowed to be a witch. I was never allowed to be a vampire. I was allowed to be a gypsy, which is now very questionable. But because the idea of wearing that costume is celebrating, something evil. I don't necessarily believe that's true anymore. I still think that someone could very well dress up as Joker. I think that, if I had a little girl, I would let her dress up as a witch. But at the same time, when you're wearing something on a t-shirt, you should be asking yourself, like Brad was saying, you should be asking yourself what you're celebrating. Are you celebrating or how what you're celebrating is going to be interpreted? Like, are you going out in the world wearing a Joker shirt saying like, hey, I really love this art? Or are you saying, I'm Team Joker?
But I could also see somebody going I understand the point of view of Joaquin Phoenix Joker. I relate to that. And even though I wouldn't necessarily descend into that black pit that he does, I understand it. I recognize it. And I would put it on my chest. There's a way that I can make it work for myself. But you do for me,
you have to think about it.
But maybe that's the other thing. Maybe we're overthinking all this shit.
Well, I mean, but Lisa's right. I think about that a lot. Every time I put this shirt on, I think twice about putting it on. I think about where I'm going. I brought it with me to Texas, and I'm like, do I want to wear a Punisher shirt with the American flag in Texas? I'm like, no. But I'm coming to the podcast. I'm like, yeah.
Now every time I put on my cartoonist kayfabe red hat, I'm like, people gonna think this is a MAGA hat from behind. Are they gonna see it from behind and think I'm a MAGA?
Yeah, but I do think about that. I think about the certain things and how it's going to be perceived, or how people will perceive me wearing it. So
at Fantastic Fest, I did wear a tank top with Wonder Woman punching Donald Trump in the face.
Oh, all right.
Nobody commented on it. I felt sad.
All right.
I bet you that's pretty much the only place you can wear that shirt in Texas.
What's your ugly, Lisa?
I'm taking everything that I forgot to talk about in my good and rolling it into my ugly because I did feel ugly coming out of that film. I did feel very sad.
You cried a lot.
I cried a lot during and after the film. I think that it is an ugly film. I do think if any character from the Spider-Man legacy has a right to complain, it's Thomas Wayne.
You mean Batman? You said Spider-Man.
Oh, sorry. We've been podcasting for a very long time, and I'm getting sleepy beepy. But Thomas Wayne in the original... Yeah. Did I say Spider-Man?
You did say Spider-Man.
Okay, well, fuck me then.
Oh.
But Thomas Wayne, in the way he's most often presented in Batman stories, was that he was the last bastion of the 1% that believed in humanity. He was a surgeon. He was an advocate for the poor. He was always rich, but he was never Donald Trump. And I think that making Thomas Wayne a Donald Trump figure in the context of this film,
and through Arthur Fleck's point of view, I'd add,
is very effective.
Yeah.
It's just one more thing that comments on our time. True. But if I was Thomas Wayne, I'd be pissed.
I mean, he of all the DC Comics characters, he gets the short shrift in this story.
And then also the presentation of celebrity. We didn't get into this.
Murray Franklin.
How he victimizes and takes advantage of Arthur when he is fully aware that he is doing so. We're in a place now as a society where we go like, well, you're getting celebrity, so it's worth it to be mocked. Like, hey, not everybody gets a 15 minutes of fame. So if your 15 minutes of fame is everybody taking a huge dump on you, you're supposed to say thank you. I think, me personally, I'm definitely over, not reality competition baking shows from England. I'm still very much into those. But I am over reality television that is rope-a-doping dum-dums into making themselves look like idiots in a camera. I'm tired of it. I'm done with it.
But you do subscribe to Dumb People Town podcast.
I do, and I'm reevaluating my life choices every day. And then also the Joker laugh. I can whip that into my ugly. And how this film addresses the hysterical. Like the label of hysteria is very loaded in medical history and very loaded in culture. Mostly it's used for women. Women are considered, when they're being irrational, they're considered hysterical. But the line between Joker or Arthur hysterically laughing I think it's your phone, Darren.
Sorry.
That's okay. The line between Arthur hysterically laughing and hysterically crying is invisible. And how so I just like that as a commentary on hysteria. And I guess that's my ugly.
Brad.
The whole movie. Everything about the movie. It's ugly. Gotham is ugly. The characters are ugly. The reaction and response to the film is ugly. Joker is ugly. Everything. The thing that bothers me the most is suffering through all the conversation around it. I've had to mute the word Joker on my timeline because I just can't deal. But that's my head in the sand approach to social media. So there you go. But yeah, the whole thing. Everything.
The ugly for me, my biggest takeaway, and it's not even a negative ugly. It's just it's also the laugh. It has to do with the laugh. I have never felt more sympathy and sorrow and pain hearing in someone's laugh. Every time from like the opening, because I had understood going into the movie Joaquin Phoenix's medical research into the condition that causes people to laugh uncontrollably in different scenarios that don't necessarily have anything that aren't tied to humor. So because the movie opens with that, like he's doing it in like one of the very first scenes of the film, and on our first screening, there was audible laughter in the audience, and even without that, I was sad and disturbed by the Joker's laughter, but I just felt bad because I knew it wasn't coming from a happy place. And every instance in the film when he would do it, whether it would be on the bus, when you first get the introduction of the medical card that explains his condition, and it was just heartbreaking to watch. Like, it was almost hard to watch. It was just because I just felt so bad for him. And then you'd have instances where he'd be doing it and like was on the train when the woman is being harassed by the guys, and Arthur's seeing that, and I can tell he's feeling uncomfortable about it, and he begins to do the laugh, and then that woman sees him, and what that must feel to her is to be like, there's a guy here, and the only thing he can do on top of me feeling uncomfortable because of these three assholes, there's a guy here who could help me, but he thinks this shit is funny too. Like, so just everything tied into that, and how, like, you know, there's a scene later on when they make a joke with this the guy, that the little guy, and Arthur walks out and he's laughing, and when he cuts that corner, he stops laughing, and you see it's deadpan. You don't see any residual laughter, humor, or, oh shit, that was funny. You don't see any of that on his face. You just see just a stillness.
The scene when he's trying to understand Gary Goldman's comedy and he's like laughing
And
at the
taking
wrong
notes.
spots and taking notes.
Yeah.
Oof.
And so on its own merit, seeing that was ugly in the film because how painful it was. But then being in an audience who were laughing at him going through these uncontrollable, uncomfortable, you know, experiencing in this condition, in the throes of this condition, this painful condition, because I got to assume psychologically and emotionally it's painful. And so being in an audience where people are laughing at that is just like the audience on the Murray Show laughing at him on stage. And so it just plays into what the film is talking about. Like, people can condemn this film or whatever, but half of the audience is what the film is speaking on, right? Like, just not seeing the human being that is suffering this condition, but just laughing at the condition, right? Failing to see the humanity in it. And that, for me, just what I was wrestling with my own thoughts on the film that I spoke about earlier, was what made the watches hard for me.
Yeah. I think it's a weird movie because audiences have not really been presented a film like this before, in the sense that I'm going to go see the new comic book movie. Yes, it's R-rated, but, you know, Deadpool's R-rated. You know, it's got to be real. It's got to be harsh. And I don't think a lot of folks go into this movie expecting the kind of film that it is, and it takes them a long time and maybe multiple watches to realize what they are seeing and experiencing. So I don't want to condemn that Friday night crowd at AMC that we saw it at, because I feel like it is a little bit of a magic trick. It is a little bit of the rug being pulled out from under you, just because of how prevalent comic book movies are right now and what we expect.
Well, I don't even condemn the audiences, people who are laughing, because to some degree, not necessarily as extreme as what Arthur experiences, but just, I think for a lot of people, it's human nature sometimes to laugh uncontrollably at situations that might not necessarily be humorous.
So painful about those laughing scenes, because laughter is involuntary.
Right.
And it's like, the laughter of the audience is a laughter that's supposed to diffuse tension.
Right, and as I was going to say, sometimes people, when there's a tension or there's something that they're uncomfortable with, sometimes the only way that their body responds to that psychologically and thus physically is to laugh, right? And so I'm not, you know, when that happens, I don't like condemn the people like, you know, fuck you, you assholes. For me, it's just painful, right? It's just painful, because if that person were there, like when Arthur's on that show, the people could be in the audience could be uncomfortably laughing at him, but for Arthur, all he feels and sees are people laughing at him, right? When in his mind and psyche, he's feeling the pain, right? And so it's just all around. I'm not saying that there's any good guys or bad guys. If all around, it's just uncomfortable just because of the nature and the reality of it for me. So that's what was ugly to me.
One thing that's really like challenging for me as a viewer is that I myself find portrayals of mania triggering. Like when I see mania out in the world, like my red flags go up. I feel a sense of danger. I feel like I need to pull away. I need to disengage because I feel like that person can be a danger to me. Like, and I don't know if that's me as a woman or me as a person who I myself have dealt with mental illness. But like, to me, like mania means unpredictableness and volatility. And so I want to disengage. Like when I see that, I want to isolate. I want to avoid the situation. But this film does play out the idea that if we isolate these volatile people, if we follow our first instinct and avoid and not empathize, we're doing that person a disservice, and we're also doing society a disservice because their problems are not being addressed, and that kind of heightened emotion has to be addressed one way or another. And that can be a harm to themselves, that can be a harm to their family, that can be a harm to greater society. And that is an uncomfortable place to be. And to me, if I thought, I went into this, I watched those trailers and I was like, this movie's going to be fucking sad. And I'm not excited to see it. But I can imagine being a person who's excited to see a comic book movie. Maybe they're like, I think Suicide Squad was the best film of all time.
Release the Snyder Cut.
Yeah. And then they bounce into Joker. And I can imagine feeling like the movie's bad, or I can imagine feeling tricked, or feeling that the movie is slow or boring because it's engaging in a conversation that I feel like I didn't sign up for.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So that is going to do it for our review cast of Todd Phillips' Joker. If you've seen the film, hit us up on social media and let us know your thoughts on it at ItModcast on Twitter, on Instagram, and or Facebook. That guy can be found at the Turtle Dork on Twitter, at the Turtle Dork 1 on Instagram, and at Brian William Young on Facebook, because his real name isn't actually Turtle Dork. His real name is actually Brian William Young.
It actually is.
Lovely young lady there can be found at Sidewalk Siren and at Bake Dork on Twitter and Instagram, because in real life, her real name just so happens to be at Sidewalk Siren and at Bake Dork.
No pseudonyms here.
Yup, keeping it real. And this guy over here is Brad Gullickson, a.k.a. Mouth Dork, on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Letterboxd, and Untapped, because his real name happens to be Untapped. And I am Darren Smith, the Disco Dork, on all social medias.
I'm a drunk.
That is going to do it for us. Thank you all for listening. Enjoy the rest of your week. And until next time.